There are a couple more bits of evidence about who Jesus said that he was that I do want to explore this week. The first is the historical evidence of the growth of the Jesus movement after he died. I'm always staggered when I look back and really think about this explosion of the growth of the early church. If you look at what started from this small group of frightened and confused fishermen, it doesn't seem possible. This was a group of disciples that had proved over and over again that they just didn't get it. A group that deserted Jesus in his darkest hour and where the leader of this group denied even knowing Jesus. A group that were hiding in an upper room, afraid of being caught, afraid of being killed. And then, a short time later, this same group were boldly proclaiming that Jesus was the Messiah, taking on the Jewish authorities, standing up for what they've witnessed and sticking to their stories even when they were being horribly tortured and executed. Somehow, from this beaten and dispirited group of people, the movement Jesus had started, the movement that looked like it would disintegrate after he was killed, this movement of nobodies, somehow it is dramatically reborn. And in a few short years, the followers of the way of Jesus, these people called Christians, have grown and are covering the known world from just over 120 women and men to millions, from a group of mainly artisan Jews huddled together and praying in Jerusalem to people of all races and backgrounds, male and female, slave and free, soldier, civilian, aristocrat and artisan, Greek and Jew, a mix of very different people who would never have mixed in this way before, brought together in following the way of Jesus. All this from a movement started by the son of a poor carpenter who taught for a few short years and then died a cruel death in a forgotten corner of the Roman Empire, crucified like so many tens of thousands before him and afterwards. A nobody. But a nobody that has more written about him than many kings or emperors of his time. Who is this Jesus? In his book, Who is This Man?, John Ortberg writes, if someone's legacy will outlast their life, it usually becomes apparent when they die. On the day when Alexander the Great or Caesar Augustus or Napoleon or Socrates or Muhammad died, their reputations were immense, their followings were huge. On the day after Jesus died, it looked as if whatever small mark he left on the world would rapidly disappear. Instead, his impact on human history has been unparalleled. His life and his teaching simply drew people to follow him. He made history by starting in a humble place, in a spirit of love and acceptance, and allowing each person space to respond. He deliberately placed himself on a collision course with Rome, where he would have been crushed like a gnat, and he was crushed. And yet, Jesus' vision of life continues to haunt and challenge humanity. His influence has swept over history like the tail of a comet, bringing his inspiration to influence art, science, government, medicine, and education. He has taught humans about dignity, compassion, forgiveness, and hope. When you look at the growth in this extraordinary movement, the impact that it's had through the millennia that followed, the transformation in the lives of the original disciples and the transformation in the lives of so many since that time, and the transformation in the lives of people today, the evidence for Jesus being who he claimed to be is overwhelming. Lee Strobel was the legal editor of the Chicago Tribune, and he's featured in one of the videos from an earlier day this week. He was an atheist who was concerned when his wife started going to church, and so he set about to disprove Christianity. He accumulated evidence over time until one evening, he says, he sat down and put a line down a pad of paper. On the one side listed all the evidence that supported Jesus being the Son of God, and on the other side all the things that raised questions about that claim. And he says he wrote and he wrote and he wrote and he wrote on that one side. And as he realized that the avalanche of evidence in favor of Jesus being who he said he was, he said it was impossible to ignore. He said that when he stood back and looked at what he'd written, it would have taken more faith to maintain his atheism. So that was the point, he says, consistent with the evidence that he decided to put his faith in Jesus Christ and follow him. I said back at one of the earlier videos last week that there's two ways you can look at knowing something. One is through the evidence that you can observe. The other is through personal experience. Evidence from what we can see of God moving in the world through the impact of things that happen around him. Like we mentioned, the wind blowing the trees. You can't see the wind, but you can see the evidence of the wind moving something around it. Seeing the evidence is great, but it's something else when you experience it for yourself. You can watch the wind through the window, but when you go and feel it, you then know something different about it. So are people still personally experiencing the impact of Jesus in their lives today? Well, that's a question for tomorrow. I hope you can join us.